let's talk about color grading our footage. Before we go to Premiere and I start taking you step by step through what we do, let's talk a little bit about shooting in log. Now, if you can remember back to the very first lesson in this tutorial, when we were talking about color profiles, we told you guys that we like shooting in a flat color profile. Now, some specialized cameras can shoot in log, which is even more flat. Most DSLRs do not have this ability, but some cameras, for instance Sony's, do allow you to shoot in log. In fact, Sony actually gives you two different options, S-Log2 and S-Log3. So I'm currently being filmed by two cameras right now, right next to each other. One is the GH5, that's what we've been filming this tutorial on. We're shooting in Cinelike D, and right next to it is the Sony a7R III shooting in S-Log2. As you can see, this is significantly flatter. Now you guys may be asking yourselves, well, you said that you like shooting flat, so do you shoot in log exclusively? And we do not. Even though the GH5 can shoot in log, you actually have to pay for it as an extra add-on. We don't shoot in log because it's a little bit more difficult to work with. First of all, the footage is extremely flat, as you can see. It makes it much more difficult to get a correct exposure, choose white balance, make sure everything's in focus. It's just much more difficult to deal with when you're actually filming. Then when you get back into Premiere, you have even more post-processing to do. Now, if you want to shoot the best quality footage possible, you will want to slow down and you're going to want to shoot in log if your camera can do it so that you can capture as much dynamic range as possible and then crunch it all back down in post and get the perfect exposure. So what we're going to do while we're outside right now is I'm going to take a few different clips with both of our cameras shooting in these two different color profiles. Then we will take these shots into Premiere and I'll show you how to process them. Okay, so for this first shot, I'm just going to be shooting with the Sony camera and I'm here in S-Log2. And as you can see, I have set up a very contrasty shot here with trees, very dark trees, set against a very bright sky. Now, another interesting thing to keep in mind when it comes to shooting in log is that your camera may force you to use a higher ISO. We're outside right now. I'd like to be shooting at ISO 100, but if I set the camera to S-Log2, I have to keep my ISO at least at ISO 800. Choosing a correct exposure out here is very difficult in S-Log. It's so flat looking, everything always looks like it's overexposed. And the thing with S-Log is you want to purposefully overexpose it. The whole point of shooting in log is that you want to be able to recover the shadows. So you want all of those shadows to be an even gray. And then when we get back into Premiere, what we're going to do is crush those blacks back down. If we expose this like we naturally would if it were a normal color profile, you're going to find that the shadows are going to have a bunch of noise. So keep in mind that you want to overexpose these shots. All right, so now I'm recording just in the standard movie color profile on the Sony camera, and it's much easier to choose a correct exposure at this point. This looks like how you'd imagine a video should look. So for this last shot, we have both cameras set up, the Sony and the GH5. On the Sony, we're going to be shooting in S-Log2, and on the GH5, we're going to be shooting in the flat color profile that we like, Cinelike D. Once again, choosing the correct exposure with the Sony camera and S-Log is incredibly difficult. I'm making sure to do a few different exposures to make sure that we have the exact right shot. But now let's head into Premiere and I'll show you how you can color grade this footage and make it look professional. Hey guys, welcome back to Premiere. Let's get into color grading here. I've got three different sets of clips here. You can see this first one is the interview that I did at the beginning of this video. The first clip is shot in S-Log2 on the Sony, and the second clip is shot in Cinelike D with the GH5. The second set of clips here is of the woods. The first one is in S-Log2. The second one is in Sony's standard color profile. And the final shot here is of the dock. Again, the first one is in S-Log2. And the final shot here is done by the GH5 in Cinelike D. Let's go ahead first of all and talk about how I would color grade our footage with the GH5. This is a little flat, but it's not that flat, and so it really doesn't require that much work for color grading. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go up here and click on the color tab, and that's just going to change the layout of all of these windows. Now, if you don't see those options, simply go up to Window, Workspaces, and here they all are. Now, you'll notice up here on the upper left, we have Lumetri Scopes, and on the right, we have Lumetri Color. And so this is going to help us color grade this footage perfectly, even if our monitor isn't completely calibrated here. So the way the Lumetri scopes works is it moves down the image from left to right, and up at 100 is white, and down at the bottom here is black. Beyond 0 is total black, and beyond 100 is total white. At the moment, you'll notice that there's nothing over 100 because straight out of the camera, anything that's pure white is just gone. And then there's nothing even close to 0 or black with this because this is a relatively flat color profile. So what we're going to have to do is push the blacks a lot. So what I'm going to do here is I am going to click on this clip down here that I want to edit. It's going to open up the Lumetri tabs over here within the sliders. And what I'm just going to do first of all is I'm going to crush the blacks. And you can see I'm pushing down the black section of this. And you'll notice that once it starts hitting 0, if I keep pushing and pushing and pushing, it's going to cause our blacks to clip. Now, if you'll notice on the left side here, there's this one little point right here. And if you're wondering, what is that? Well, it could be the black area underneath my hat. And so that is the darkest place in this entire clip. And as I'm pushing the blacks, that's what's going to start clipping first. Now, if I have no data under the black part of my hat, it's not the end of the world, but I don't want to go too far with it. So I might push the blacks just a little bit. And then what I'm going to do at this point is start messing with the shadows. And what the shadows are going to do, it's going to push everything down except for those black levels. So it's not really crushing the blacks, but it's still making the image darker. So that looks pretty good to me right there. And what I can do now, if I wanted to, I might add a little bit of saturation to get some of those colors back. And to my eye, I feel like the greens look pretty good, but as I bump up the saturation, I think it's also making my skin pretty orange. So what I can do is I can go down to curves here, and down here what I'm going to do is click on these colors to bring the dots up. And what this is going to allow me to do is pinpoint certain colors and pull them down or up. I know that my skin tones are right around in this color, and so I can pull them down. You can see I can pull them down way too much. It's also going to be pulling the orange out of the leaves, so I don't want to go too crazy with this. But I may just want to pull it down just the slightest bit. It keeps my skin tones looking natural, but at the same time, we have those really pretty leaves. Now, another thing that I am not a huge fan of is the composition of this shot. I feel like David should have zoomed in a little bit more, but luckily we're shooting in 4K and we're probably going to export at 1080, so we have a lot of room to play. So if I go back up to editing up here, it will bring up the effects control, and maybe I'll scale this up to 125, and then I can move the frame a little bit. Maybe I'll even go more. Let's go to 150. And we can play it back. So that's a pretty standard color grade. This might be a little bit too saturated for your taste, but you get the basic idea. Feel free to edit your footage however you like. Now let's look at the Sony S-Log2 footage. This is going to require a little bit more work, but really not that much more at all. Once again, I'm going to click on the color tab up here to bring up these scopes. And you'll notice how compressed everything is here. Instead of having a wide gamut of like bright brights and dark darks, everything is squashed in the middle of this Lumetri scope over here on the left. So instead of messing with the black slider and the white slider here at the beginning, I'm going to actually mess with the curves first. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the blacks level down here and I'm just going to slide it over, and I'm going to start pushing the levels over here. Now again, you'll notice in the middle of the scopes over here, I'm starting to hit black, and I believe that's probably my watch. It's the inside of my sleeve here, and it's underneath my hat. At this point, I feel like we're pretty good. You'll notice up here in the upper left, which is representing the upper left of this shot up here, you can see the sky through the trees. We're close to hitting 100, but we're not actually hitting 100. So I'm just going to pull the white point over just a little bit. And I don't mind if we have some pure whites in this, but I don't want to go too crazy with it. Now at this point, it's still looking pretty flat, but we have a good base to work from. So I'm going to go back up to basic correction, and now I'm going to start messing with the shadows. We'll darken this up a lot. And let's push the highlights a little bit. Now, one thing you'll notice when you're shooting in log is that in most cases it's very desaturated. So we're going to have to add a lot of saturation here. Let's see, I can also mess with the color temperature a little bit if I wanted to warm it up just a little bit. And I'm just going to flip to my other clip because I want to see kind of the way that I graded it before. So you'll notice that this is still looking a little flat. I think we need some more whites or bright areas in this shot. Now, one thing that I'm noticing between these two clips is there seems to be a green shift in the Sony footage that's not in our GH5. And that could be, simply setting the white balance slightly differently. So what I'm going to do is add some magenta tint to this just a little bit. And I'm looking at my skin tones as I go back and forth. So now I'm back in the hue saturation curves adjustment here, and I'm just trying to add a little bit different skin tone just to try to match the footage from the two cameras. And there's no way you're ever going to get this perfect. But just trying to get as close as we can, as quickly as we can. Now, if you can remember, I zoomed in to the other clip. Now, if I wanted to quickly replicate that, all I have to do is click on this first clip here, and I'm going to go back over to editing. I'm going to click on motion, and I can copy this, click on the clip that I want to move it to, and I can paste. And you can see we have the exact same crop. I'm going to mute this sound so you don't have to hear it, and let's watch this. So this is, again, very, very saturated, maybe a little bit too much even for my taste, but you get the basic idea here. Let's move on to the next two clips. Now, in these clips, what I've done is I shot in S-Log2 and I shot in a standard color profile just so you could see what shooting in S-Log can actually do for you. And you'll notice with this second clip here, it looks pretty good right out of the camera. Maybe I would add a little bit of saturation to it. So let's go back over to color here. And we'll go to basic correction, and I'll just bump up the saturation a little bit, try to get some of those greens back in here. So let's just say that that's good. That's exactly what we wanted the clip to look like. Let's see if we can get the S-Log2 footage to look like this now. Again, I'm going to go to curves, and I'm going to set this black point, and I'm going to keep an eye on the lumetri scopes. I want it to hit the bottom but not crush those blacks. Maybe right there. Now, if you'll notice up here in the white point, we have a lot of whites because there's a lot of white sky coming through these trees here. So I'm not going to boost the whites. I feel like they are right on the money. So let's go into basic correction now and start messing with these sliders a little bit. So I'm just going to be clicking back and forth between the two clips. Let me go ahead and add some saturation to this. See if I can get it to look similar. We are pretty close. Now, let's zoom in so that we can really see the benefits here of shooting in log. I'm going to click this. Instead of fit, I'm going to click 100%. Now, I'm on a 1080 monitor right now, so 100% is going to actually show me 100%. If you're on a 4K monitor, you may need to zoom in to like 400% to really see all of the pixels. But as you can see here, what I'm going to do is pick an area of contrast where we can see a bunch of the leaves and the sky behind it. So this is perfect because here we can see the dark bark on the trees, we can see the green leaves, and then we can see the bright sky. And you'll notice there's actually detail in the sky. It's not completely white. Now let's click over to the next clip. Huge difference. Huge difference. First of all, let's just notice this tree trunk here. And notice how much data we have lost in those dark shadows. There's so much more detail. It looks sharper. It just looks so much better out of the S-Log footage. Now, moving on to the leaves. I mean, these leaves are just getting eaten by that white sky in the standard profile shot. Shooting in log, we have all of that detail, and we've still retained detail in the sky as well. Look at the lumetri scopes over here as I go between these two. You'll notice how much dynamic range there is in this clip. And then when we move to the other one, so much of it is clipped in the whites. All of this white area up here is just smashed. So I think this is a great illustration of how S-Log works. Think of it like this. Anything beyond white, your camera can't capture, and anything beyond black, your camera can't capture. Once something is white, the data's just gone. It's just white, and if it's black, it's totally black. So what S-Log is doing is it's basically compressing that area and saying, don't make anything pure white and don't make anything pure black. And then we get to manually set the black and white point when we get back into Premiere, stretch everything back out, and there's just a lot more data to work with. So let's look at this final clip where we shot with the Sony over here. I'm gonna zoom back out to fit here. This is the Sony clip, and this is our Panasonic clip. And you'll notice one little issue. I feel like the Sony clip, the horizon's going to the right a little bit. Let me just fix that real quick. What I'm going to do is click on Effects, and then Rotation I can change right here. And that's the wrong way, so I'm going to hit -2 right there. Now you'll notice that we've got black on the corners here, so we're going to have to zoom into the footage. So let's zoom in to 105 and see if that's enough. It's not quite enough. We'll go a little bit more, 107. And at this point, I think we've got clean edges. So let's click between these two. A little bit closer. And just to try to get the GH5 footage to match, I'm going to zoom in on the GH5 just a little bit. Let's go to 110. See what this looks like. That's pretty close. All right, first of all, let's edit the GH5 footage. Now, as you can see, all of my options for different workspaces has deleted itself somehow, so I'm going to go to Window, Workspaces, and Color. Now again here, looking at the lumetri scope, we have lots of whites going on in the sky here, so I don't want to mess with the white levels, but I am going to pull the blacks down. So I'm going to start pushing these down until it starts hitting that bottom level down there. That's probably good. And then I'm going to start pushing the shadows. Now with shots like these, you can change the white balance a lot depending on the vibe that you want for the shot. So if you want it to look like a warm summer day, you might want to push the white balance to the right a lot. If you want it to look like cold winter, you can push it to the left. I think I like it looking a little bit warmer than normal. And let's see what the saturation does. Just add a little bit. So that looks pretty good. Let's move on to the Sony shot. Again, I'm going to go into curves and I'm going to set the black point, and this one needs to move a lot. Keep going. Right there. Now, notice over here is where it's hitting first. That's representing the left side of the frame, and you can see there's dark areas in this tree and dark areas underneath here. And I believe those are the darkest points on this entire image. So I'm going to crush those just a little bit. I'm actually going to leave the whites alone because we're just barely clipping right in the middle of the frame. So I'm going to move back to basic correction over here. And now I'll start pushing and pulling this. So shadows, let's go down a lot. Add a little bit of saturation. And let's double check what we did on the other shot. It's a lot warmer, so I'm going to add some white balance off to the right. And once again, you'll notice, like, especially in the tree to the left, notice there's a hint of green in the Sony shot. So again, I'm going to add just a hint of magenta to try to counteract that. Now let's zoom in and look at this tree branch up against that white sky. So as I cycle between these two clips, you'll notice how much sharper the GH5 footage is than the Sony S-Log footage, and we can easily sharpen that by simply going to Creative here and adding some sharpening here. And this certainly isn't identical, but this is pretty close. You could certainly use both of these shots in the same video, and nobody would be able to tell unless they were back to back. Okay, so I want to talk about one more thing. Let's talk about color contrast. We can actually change the color and the shadows and the highlights separately from one another and give our image a really interesting look. This is what they do in a lot of movies. They're adding different colors to the shadows especially. You'll notice a lot of blue in the shadows. I'm going to go back to this first clip of my interview, and let's work with the GH5 footage. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to color wheels, and you'll notice down here we have shadows, midtones, and highlights. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the shadows down and to the right to the blue. And you'll notice as I do this, it's changing my skin tone. We don't really like the look of that, but it's adding some interesting colors to these trees in the back. I do like that blue in the shadows look. So to counteract what we've just done, we need to add some amber in the midtones. So I'm going to grab this and push it back up, and what I'm trying to do is save my skin tones here. And if you want to see what you've done, you can click on this little checkbox up here. And so you can see when I click on this, how little we've actually done to my skin tones. So let's push this even further here. I'm gonna drag the shadows down even darker into the blue area, and then let's go even heavier into the amber color here. And we'll click this on and off so we can see what it looks like. So you can see that we've given our clip here a really interesting look. Let's play this back so you can see what it looks like in real time. So now you have a basic understanding of how color grading works. I want to show you one more thing though, and that's adjustment layers. Right now we've been adding Lumetri color to each of these clips individually, and because these were shot on different cameras, this is probably exactly the way that I would do it. But in most cases, you're going to have a timeline all shot with the same camera, and in many cases, you want to add the same effect to every single clip. Now, you could do that. I'm going to click on editing back up here. You could do that by clicking on a clip, clicking on Lumetri color that's in your effects controls up here, right-clicking, copy, and then what we could do, I'm going to click over on this Sony clip that we've already edited. I could delete this. I could click on this and delete it. And then I can hit Control V to paste it in here, and you'll notice that on this clip, it's just not enough, right? Let me undo that. But what we can do is we can click over here, and I'm going to click on New Adjustment Layer. I'll click OK, and I'm just going to drag this on top down here. And I'm going to drag it across so that it covers the entire thing. And what I can do is I can copy this Lumetri color. I'm then going to delete it. So this is our GH5 footage straight out of camera. And then I can go on this adjustment layer and I can paste it into here. And then we have the exact same effect. The benefit of this is that you are adding an effect over the entire timeline, and you can quickly cycle it on and off by clicking this little eyeball. So let me show you how I would use adjustment layers if I was editing a video. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this clip over here that was shot on the GH5, and then this last clip over here was shot on the GH5 as well. I'm just hitting Control C and then clicking over here, Control V. I'm going to right click here, ripple delete to get them next to each other. And I am going to delete the Lumetri color that we've already done on both of these clips. Now, I think both of these shots were actually filmed correctly, but let's say for argument's sake that the white balance was wrong and maybe it was a little underexposed. So let's say that this shot was too blue and it was underexposed. So what I would do is, first of all, I would just fix that. So let's say I would come in and I would add a lumetri color to this individual clip. I'm just going to raise the exposure back up to where it should be. I'm going to fix the color temperature. Maybe it should be around there. And then I'm going to look at this next clip. This one looks fine to me. So now that I've fixed the mistakes with these clips, let's add the adjustment layer on top of both of them and then add the lumetri color to that. I'm just going to drag this across so it fits both clips. I'm going to go back up here, click color. I'm then going to make sure that I'm clicking on the adjustment layer itself. And now I'm going to start giving my footage a look. I'm going to bring the blacks down. I'm going to bring the shadows down. I am going to boost the highlights just a little bit. Add a little bit of saturation. And I feel like my skin's getting orange, so I'm going to pull some of that out. Okay, I feel like that looks pretty good. But because we've done it to the adjustment layer, now it's affected my second shot as well. So you can see that this clip is now color graded as well, and I can easily toggle on and off the adjustment layer. I'm just toggling off anything that's in the second layer up here. And this makes color grading really, really easy if you're using all of the same camera. So that's my best suggestion to you. If everything is filmed correctly, then just stick an adjustment layer on top, add your lumetri color to that, you should be good to go. If you have some clips that need a little bit of tweaking before doing that, tweak each clip individually, then add the adjustment layer on top of that. So guys, as you can see, it's really not difficult at all. Hopefully you enjoyed this chapter. We'll see you in the next one.